Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. In this video I'm going to be shooting some film that I've never shot before. KH-1, it was kindly sent to me by the guys over at Ukraine, the Ukrainian film photography community, and they sent me a couple of rolls of this stuff. It's quite unique. It's only 12 ISO. There's no information that I could find on how to develop this film, so I've only got a couple of rolls and I didn't want to waste it, go out and waste it and then come back and develop blind. So the best way to do it is do a few tests first. So I thought in this video I'll show you the quality of this film. I've already seen it. It's actually really nice. It surprised me, and I'll just give you a little idea and overview of how I go about testing my development times for films when I haven't got any times to go on. So no doubt we've all got our own little ways of doing this sort of thing, and this is my way. If it helps anybody, great. If anybody has any other suggestions, put it in the comments for me and other people to read as well. That's the thing with film photography, we're always so isolated. We do things on our own unless we're online sort of researching stuff. So I've got my developer that I'm using, which is ID-11, and I'm going to be using that 1 to 1 part in a rotary processor at 20 degrees. So I've already got that already planned. All I need to do then is see how long I need to develop this film to get decent results out of it. So what I do is I'll put this inside my camera, the film in the camera, and I'll shoot a few shots, maybe 5, maybe 6 photographs, and then I can use that as a test, and from there I can decide if I need to up the development or take development time off. At least then I've got the rest of the roll to go out and shoot, not so blind. If you don't do any home developing, then I'm wondering to myself, I wonder what labs do. If you was to send a film off to a lab and there was no information online about what times to develop, I wonder how they get around that. I don't know. But most of the time you can find your development times for whatever film you're shooting. There's a few different websites to go on. There's the massive dev chart, which I think everyone knows about. And there's another couple of websites that you might be interested in for looking for development times. There's one called Darkroom Solutions. I've never used that. But there's another one called filmdev.org. I've used that in the past, and that's also people upload their photographs to give you examples of what they've done with their film in development. So that's quite a good website as well. I'll put a link in the description if any of you guys want to click on that. So normally what I do with films, if I don't know what the dev times are, I'll take a roll of film, for example, say it's a 100 speed film, and I'll put that in my camera and I'll take some photographs, maybe 4, 5 or 6, and then I'll go in the dark room and I'll cut that piece of exposed film out of the camera and put it into my developing tank that's there ready to be developed. And then I'm left with a piece of film like this, which I can then cut and reuse. So I've got 36 frames in here. I've only wasted around about 6 or 7 frames for my testing. So if it's a 100 speed film, I usually go for a 10-minute mark. So if I'm using ID-11 and I haven't got a clue what times to develop this particular film for, I'll go for a 10-minute development, and if it's rotary processing, I'll probably go to about 7.5 or 8 minutes. And from there, I can see whether I need to develop for longer or if I need to take time off the development with that small test. And what I'm looking for is mostly of the time, I'm looking for the leader of the film. Now, remember that when you put the film in the camera, that leader there has already been exposed to daylight. So you can't get any more exposed than that. I don't want that to be jet black and so dense that I can hardly see through it. That would indicate that the 10-minute development time was too long and the film is overdeveloped, it's overcooked. And after development, if the leader is too transparent, which means I can see clearly through it at daylight if I hold it up, a little bit like a pair of sunglasses, that's going to indicate to me that the development wasn't long enough. The density in the film didn't build up, so that's going to come out with underdeveloped negatives that are going to look a little bit muddy and not very nice at all. So what I'm looking for is for my leader to be just about dense enough that I can still see through it. Don't forget, this has been grossly overexposed when you're putting it into the camera. So I'm looking up at the light in the bathroom that I've got. I always use that light, and if I look through it and I can just about see the light through it, then I'm happy. That means that anything on that photograph that's got highlights on, such as a bright sky, a bright shirt, maybe a white wall where the sunlight's banging on it, I know that I'm going to be able to get detail in those photographs, because going by the leader, that's grossly overexposed. I can still slightly see through the leader, so that means I'm going to get some detail in my photographs. This has always worked for me, and that's what I've always gone on. And you can see there's the proof in the pudding. I was really lucky with this film. I winged it at 8.5 minutes on the rotary, 8 minutes on the rotary processor, and wrote all my times down, 1 part to 1 part, ID-11 at 20 degrees, and they came out banging. I was really happy with the way they looked. I reckon I can still maybe add another minute, so that's what I'm going to do with the rest of these photographs. So with all that said, that's the test that I've done. I now know what my development times are. All it leaves me to do is put this film inside my camera and carry on taking some photographs on my little project. Now, I've got a couple of projects going on at the moment. Most of you guys know that I've been out looking up recently in bright banging sunlight. A project that I'll probably finish by 2042. Epoxy weather. Just to pass those boredom days away, if you like, when I ain't got a clue what I want to go out and do. I can carry on with my project. So I go out looking up at buildings and stuff in sunlight and see what I get, getting shadows and tones, etc., compositions. Another project I thought might be quite good is trying to collect old stuff. And I'll give you an idea. I asked my neighbour, he's got a garage full of old stuff, and I said, can I have a little rummage around and see what I can photograph? He said, yeah, fill your boots. So I went in there and I found an old Castrol oil tank that he gave me and an old box with some old spanners in. So I thought, well, that's great. And that can lead on to something else. I can go around thrift or charity shops. I can go around boot fairs or garage sales, as you call it, or garage sales, as you guys call it out in the States. I don't know what it's called elsewhere. Looking for stuff that's old that I can take photographs of, and that's quite fun because I can set up a scene, just natural window light, or I can use artificial lights. I can change the backgrounds, change the foregrounds, and just try and build a little project of old still life black and white photographs. And it's quite fun and really simple to do. But I'll show you some of the objects that I've found and what I'm going to be doing with them, show you the scenes, show you the backgrounds and stuff that I'm going to be using, and see what we can get with this Soviet KH-1 film. I'll put a link in the description. I think the guys are selling this stuff, so I'll put a link in the description if you're interested. So this is really simple stuff that I'm doing, just finding old objects or subjects that I can shoot as still life, and just choose different backgrounds for it, see what I get. So the thing is, I don't know what the reciprocity failure is on this film, so I'm not going to go on any exposures over 1 second. So in this room with that window light behind me, it looks quite nice. I'm shooting f2.8 at 1 second. That's what the meter inside this camera's giving me. I've got a 50mm lens on there, f2.8. Done. And the fun part about this sort of project is it's indoors, it's cold outside, so if it's on a rainy day, it don't matter, you can continue doing it. You can make different backgrounds, you can find different subjects, put them in different positions and stuff. I said they were screwdrivers, they're not, they're filing, spanners I said, they're files. Look at this old Castrol oil can that I found in my neighbour's garage. This thing's proper old, so I'm going to have another little rummage through his garage and see what else I can find. But again, I can go to thrift shops. I can even go outside and do this sort of stuff, find nice brickwork or whatever and take these objects outside in the daylight and shoot. And if I want to control any lighting, I can take some scrims with me or whatever. So it's quite good fun to do. And this is another background that I've got here. I made this one ages ago, a few years ago I think. I put it on the channel just using some primer spray underneath and then spraying some black spray over the top to get this sort of mottled look. So I've made my own mottled background. It's on a piece of backing board for a picture frame. So we'll take the same shot, just jiggle them around a little bit, just use a different background. See how that comes out. Got a slight shadow going on behind, but I don't mind that. So yeah, I think it looks really nice framed as well. I love the way the tank is separated by that mottled background where I've burnt around the edges. I think it looks great. There's only one thing, I've got a little tiny piece there that's stuck in the emulsion. Don't know what that is, but I can just spot that a little tiny bit, get that back in the frame, and it'll look nice. And whenever I do these tests, I always make sure that I'm using a camera that's got an accurate light meter inside, such as this Nikon FM3A. That way I know my exposures are going to be bang on. And even though having an accurate light meter isn't going to make any difference to the leader, at least I know that the images on that strip of film have been exposed correctly. So they're not going to tell me any lies. If anything's wrong with the development, it's going to be me, not the camera. And I also use the camera in aperture priority as well. I've got a large window behind me and the light can change any moment. If I've got it in aperture priority, that means the camera is going to take the picture and measure the light straight away, much quicker than I can. If I was to do it manually, and as I look through the viewfinder there, get my shutter speed, as I change the dial and take, by the time I've done all that, that light might have changed slightly. So just by doing that, I know that the camera is going to take the photograph at the correct speed according to the light outside. And when I'm doing these tests, I always try and avoid tricky scenes, such as scenes where it's really bright highlights and dark shadows. That can sometimes be a little bit hard for film. So a scene like this is perfect for me to find the right times for my development for this film. And because I've only got 2 rolls of this film, I don't want to keep testing and testing. The more I do that, the more I'm just going to keep wasting the film. So at least by doing this, I can get in the right ballpark for the development times for this film, where I can then shoot the rest of that film and the other film as well and get acceptable or decent results. But I've got to make sure that I stick to exactly the same development routine. But because I'm using a rotary processor, it's pretty much the same anyway. If I was using my handheld inversions and doing this, as soon as I start going off plan and doing more, maybe 10-15 second inversions instead of 5-second inversions, or doing harder agitations, things are going to start changing with the density. So I need to keep exactly the same developing technique as I did with my tests. Then I'll get the same results and I'll get good photographs. So with this test, I found my time at 8 minutes on the rotary processor. I decided to go for 9 minutes, so that's what I'm going to stick to for this film. But those times might change for different films or even different developers, such as 510 Pyro or other staining property developers. Their job is to preserve the highlights, so this sort of test ain't too great with those developers. And even though the massive DevChart and other online websites give you development times for films, that's only a guide, that's only a tried and tested times by other people. The times will get you in the right ballpark, but you still may want to do a few tests yourself to get the times that are ideal for you. And I always remember an old school photographer once said to me, if you think you're going to be blowing out your highlights in camera or when you expose the film, he said, just drop your development slightly. He said, you'll always be able to recover the highlights. And it's something that I've never forgotten, something that I often do. And of course, it makes sense. The longer you develop the film, the more the highlights are going to build up. The film density is going to get much greater, so those highlights have got more chance of blowing out the longer you develop. I did a video some while ago about pushing film. I'll put a link in the description. It explains a lot about development, and there's a few tests in there where I completely overdeveloped, and you can see the results from what I remember on that video, all about pushing film. I'll put a link in the description if you're interested. And if you have time, pause this video and go and have a look at one of your negative folders and try and find a sleeve where you've kept the leader and you've got a mixed bag of highlights and tones. Have a look at the exposures in that sleeve, and if you're really happy with the whole set, then take the leader and hold it up to the light. That's probably the ideal density from whatever film and developer you used at the time. So if you want to do that, just pause the video and then come back in the comments and let me know how you got on. So like I said, I've always done these tests and I've always found it a good guideline for me to go on, especially when I've got a film and I don't know what the times are. I have looked around online for this film that I'm shooting, and I looked at a few sites. I couldn't find any time, so I just thought, you know what, I'm going to do what I know best and have a little dabble and a little test myself. And even when I do develop films at FP4 and I know that the development's right, the first thing I do when I pull the film out of the wash, you might have seen me on the channel, I always look at the leader first. I don't even look at the photographs. I look at the leader because that's going to tell me a lot. And then I'll look at the photographs. If the leader's good and the photographs are overexposed, whatever, that's a problem in the camera. That's my exposure. But if the leader looks good, then the rest of the images, if I've done my exposures right in the camera, should be really good. So I've run out of sort sort of old stuff to take photographs of, no problem. I can just collect it as I go along. So I decided to go out to a place called Arrington Barnes, and they've got loads of old machinery stuff on show for the people to see when they visit and go for a drink or whatever. So I went milling around there with a tripod and the Nikon camera, 50mm lens, and obviously the film, and to see what I could get around there. And I wasn't so interested in getting everything in the composition. I just wanted to get detail, so you'll see sort of cogs and springs and stuff like that I was sort of looking at and trying to compose and get close in on. And I'm guessing that this stuff doesn't have to be indoors. If there's somewhere you can go where you can find old stuff like that, obviously get permission and then go and photograph it. Even take backgrounds with you if you want, so you can sort of, you know, do it yourself and create something different rather than taking the photographs of the objects that are there with brick walls and stuff. You could take your own backgrounds and have a little dabble. And then I left that place, and then on the way home I went into another place which is actually closed, but I managed to get in through the car park, and there's an old tube train and an old bus, and I remember it being there, so I thought I'd quickly stop off there before I get home and take a couple of photographs. And alright, they're not quite close up, they was sort of, the tube train was behind a wide fence, but I still like the photograph and I like the composition. So I made some prints in the darkroom. I've only made 4 or 5 prints, including the one there you see was framed. I really like that one. That's come out better than I thought. All I've got to do is just, like I said, a little bit of spotting on the top there, but I'll take this back out of the frame. You can see it, I've got light bouncing all over it. That's the trouble with when you put these behind glass. See if you can, I think you can see it there, look. It's got some really nice tones in that film. And what I did, I think I mentioned in the video, I burned around the edges just to make that centerpiece pop out. But yeah, I like that. I'm going to get that framed, but I'll get it framed, it is framed. I'm going to get it reframed. I need to take that little tiny spot. So I made a few prints in the darkroom. One of them was this photograph there of the tube train. That's an old 1940s tube train, and that was closed off with this fence. I like that sometimes. If I can see a fence and I've got something the other side of the fence that I want to take a photograph of, it's always interesting to shoot, get the fence in the foreground, as long as you can get the right aperture. Otherwise it will, the fence, you can easily get rid of it by shooting a wide open aperture. But this one, I think it was around f8, something like that, f11. And yeah, I like that photograph there. Big sign there saying no unauthorised entry. So I've got that print. And another one here, it can either be that way or it can be that way. These cogs on some of that old machinery that I found. And that was quite a good shoot, walking around there and just taking close-ups of all that old machinery and stuff. So there's an old cog photograph there. That will look nice when it's framed. And this is that old beaten up tractor. I took this because the tractor was kind of like this silver colour, so I was interested to see how this film reacted with the silver, and you can see it looks really nice. You can see that there. It's come out really looking well. So yeah, that old tractor, I think that's quite a cool photograph. So that one's probably be framed at some point. I've got so many prints. One day I'll have to make a video and show you guys all the prints that I've made over the years. They're all in a box. It'll be nice to get a lot of them framed, but I run out of room around the house. I mean, my wife's going to go nuts if it's just my prints all over the place. You know, she likes a few flowers and stuff. And that's one more picture that I took. Another close-up of some old oil tank and some bit of machinery. They're great, the machines though. But yeah, another print that I made there in the darkroom. I forgot to mention one thing. 120 film, you don't get a leader. If you really do want to test a 120 film, you're going to have to shoot the whole roll. I don't think there's any way of cutting a 120 film out of a camera, and then it would just be too much of a faff. But what I generally do with 120 film, if I want to test the leader, is I'll shoot the very first frame at very bright light. So I'll overexpose it for not so long that the light just bleeds into the other frames. I've seen that before. But I'll just shoot it a bright torch into the lens or whatever and give it about 2-second exposure. Hopefully the light doesn't leak into the next frame. As I said, sometimes it has done. And that way I can then see that as a kind of a leader and test it in my development. So once I've developed that 120 film, I can then look at that first frame and I can say to myself, okay, this film needs a little bit more or a little bit less exposure. So with 120 film, it's a little bit different. There it is. I've got my dinner down me and all, poxy thing. So anyway, guys, hope you found that video interesting for those people that have got films and are not quite sure of what the times are. That's what I do, and it's always worked for me. Let me know in the comments if any of you guys do it differently, because we all do stuff differently. This works for me, like I say, and I get a good development and good negatives from it most of the time. And even then, if I haven't, I can then tweak the time. So I'm quite comfortable with the way that I do this. Let me know in the comments if anyone does it differently. And thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.